Good evening, Browns fans, and welcome to OBR Weekly. We have earned the name. We're part of the OBR. We show up here once a week. He's the legend, that guy over there, Mr. Fred Greetham. How you doing, Fred?
Doing good, Barry.
That's good to hear. It's good to hear. I'm doing good as well. Before we get into it, the usual disclaimer that comes with the program. This show is truly powered by your comments and questions as people filter into the Twitch and YouTube chat rooms. We love to hear from you during the show, and it gives us something to bounce off of during the show, makes the show more interesting. So please feel free to hit us up with any comments and questions you have from Twitch or YouTube chat rooms. And if you're watching us on X, like a lot of people are, feel free to join us in YouTube. We send out a message with the YouTube link or Twitch link, whatever you're happy with. We'd be happy to have you and respond to your comments and questions. So what I wanted to do today, Fred, is with the rookies showing up here in a couple of days, the veterans showing up before we get together next time, next Wednesday, is really go over what I think are the big questions associated with training camp. Maybe you have others. If you're watching, or Fred, maybe you have others, but these are the ones that I picked out as I was sort of thinking about training camp and so on and so forth. Harrison Bryant's found a job. Thank you, Sancho. That's always good to hear. Not sure why it's showing up in Times New Roman, but hey, there's just something for everyone, I guess. So, Fred, the first question that we have to talk about heading into this training camp, it's the obvious one. It's the quarterback situation. We have 4 quarterbacks in camp, and 4-way competition between Flacco, Pickett, Gabriel, and Sanders. You have to think that Flacco and Pickett are the ones who are the front runners at this point. Do you think there's any chance at all that one of the rookies can pass those guys during training camp?
Well, I think so. Obviously, you can't say something because you don't know what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
One of those guys could really light everything up. Like you think of Russell Wilson, his rookie year was a 3rd-round pick. Seahawks had went out and got a high-priced free agent quarterback to be their quarterback, and Wilson won the job from the get-go, and they never looked back, until the end of his career, and they moved on. So something like that could happen. But I just feel like where the Browns are right now, I don't think that's likely, especially with the beginning of that schedule. Those 6 games, I keep coming back to that. You open with the Bengals and then the Ravens on the road, and you have the 3 NFC North teams that, all went to the playoffs. I think 5 of the 6 teams last year went to the playoffs. The worst one on paper was the Bengals, and you look at them and you think, that's a high-flying machine there. And so it's very hard to think the Browns would be favored in any of those 6 games. And I just don't think it makes sense to throw either of those rookies out there, just to throw them out there. There's plenty of time in the season. It's really going to come down to what is their philosophy. They've said all along they plan to compete and not rebuild or retool or anything. They've kind of said that to their veterans, their Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, David Njoku, Joel Bitonio, a lot of the guys on this team. And they're going to know in the locker room who's most equipped, ready to start the season. If it's hands down Kenny Pickett and they say we're going with Dylan Gabriel, I don't think that's going to fly. If it's hands down Joe Flacco, I don't think it's going to fly. So that's what I see. I think it's highly unlikely that a rookie, starts. It's different if they would have picked up one of these guys with the number 2 pick overall, then I would expect them to start. Even the year Baker Mayfield was the number 1 pick, he wasn't expected. He didn't start until there was an injury in the 3rd game. So I just don't think that it makes sense to throw somebody out there before they're ready, unless they deem them being ready.
Right. Well, that makes total sense. But, we're going to be watching, not we, you and I necessarily, but fans are going to be watching every single day to try to get a glimpse of, any hint as to who is leading this competition or who is getting favored or whatever. How long do you think it's going to take? Your first chance to see him is going to be a week from today. How long do you think it's going to take to really get a sense of how reps are being split and what the coaching staff's philosophy is going to be with training camp with these guys?
Yeah, really hard to know, because I don't know if they're going to continue having the 2 fields going with 2 quarterbacks on each side or just limit it down. I mean, you're now getting into somewhat crunch time. Your first preseason game's the 8th of August. You're going down to practice with the Panthers on the 6th. So you're literally looking at less than 2 weeks, maybe 10 practices before, you're going against competition. I think those practices against the Panthers, and then the next week they're going to Philadelphia and having 2 practices with them. I think that's really where they're going to be gauging a lot of this. The coaches can control who they put these quarterbacks against, so you can really gauge them against a top defense in the Eagles. And I really think that you have to come out of there, I would think, if you haven't before, with a decision who you're going to start, because they always talk about the third preseason game or the last one being your dress rehearsal, and that's the next week, that home game against the Rams. So you have to get whoever you're starting ready for the opening of the season. Kevin Stefanski hasn't used the preseason much to get guys ready. He went the other way, kept guys, on the bench and trying to, keep them from even getting hurt or anything. I think it'll be different this year. I don't know how much Joe Flacco will play, but I think Pickett, Sanders, and Gabriel will play a lot in the preseason. But I think you have to make a decision. I would think that week of the Eagles game. If you don't do it before the Eagles preseason game, I would think it'd be immediately after that as you're going into the last preseason game.
Yeah. Now, that's talking about, what point do we pick a starter? At what point do you think the Cleveland Browns are going to be able to say, hey, we should trade one of these guys? Do you think they're going to do that at all? Or do you think that they would sort of wait until that final preseason game? Or how do you think that they'll approach that?
Well, I think, first of all, I'd be highly surprised if they traded one of the rookies. When they made the decision to draft both those guys are on the team. So it comes down to Kenny Pickett is the most tradable. Have you got enough information to feel that Dylan Gabriel and or Shedeur Sanders are capable to do what Kenny Pickett does? If you are, you trade him. I mean, Andrew Berry traded Josh Dobbs when he was the clear-cut backup quarterback and went with DTR, who was a rookie. We all know that didn't play out very well.
Right.
But I still think that I wouldn't be surprised if all four make it to the regular season, or at least to the final 53 cuts. And then they try to make a trade or a move that week like they did last year. They tried to trade Winston or Huntley. They were unable to trade either. They cut Huntley. I could see that being the case. It really comes down to, okay, is Joe Flacco starter or off the team? Is Kenny Pickett, he's the most tradable. If there's an injury and a team comes calling and they feel good enough about Gabriel Sanders, I think that they would make the trade then and there.
Right. Well, we've got a question from chat username on the subject of quarterbacks. He says, question, is there any quarterback with special leadership, confidence, motivational skills that might, help him sort of edge out the others? Or is that something you expect to see from all four of them?
Was there a name there or you?
Yeah, chat username. That's his name.
Okay, but I'm saying, is he asking about one of the four?
No, he's just asking, out of the four, is there anyone with these special skills that will help them stand out?
Well, I think Joe Flacco. I mean, he's been a leader. He's an 18-year veteran. He's confident. He's won the Super Bowl. I think MVP in a Super Bowl. Motivational. I mean, he's just old, older. And, so that's why I've said I think he's the favorite, even though the Browns might think that Pickett is the favorite. I mean, it's, if it's truly a competition, that will play itself out in training camp, and that's what I said, what the locker room determines, if those leaders and everybody sees Flacco's clear cut the best quarterback and they don't play him, then it's for other reasons. But if the other ones pass him up, then they'll go another direction. But as far as, I think that just because he's been around, he has exuded all those different. In other words, he couldn't come off the couch in 2023 and did what he did, without even playing the whole year if he didn't have a lot of those things already.
Yeah, a lot of those traits. And really, Sanders and Gabriel both have, a lot of hype behind them as being, guys who, are in charge of the locker room. Pickett, I really can't get a read on, but the other guys. So that's question number one. What's going on with the quarterbacks here? How soon are we going to be able to tell which guy is emerging on top? Are we going to be able to tell that at all when these guys are going to get traded? There's a lot of storylines around quarterback, but there's also now a lot of stories around running back. And we've got a couple of questions about that I'll just throw up here on the screen. First, a question from E. Gillen. Does Andrew Berry seriously have to think about a replacement for Judkins early in the season, considering the run game plans? And James Porsche has a very similar question about, is he going to replace Judkins at running back as he serves his suspension? Fred, my take on this is that it's going to be tough to go with their power running game without Judkins, that he was a integral part of that. Do you think I'm being a little bit hasty with that? Do you think, Jerome Ford, Dylan Sampson, Pierre Strong, one of those guys can emerge as a runner who can drive this power running attack that they want?
I don't think it's understated. This is a major blow, in my opinion, to what they had planned this year. Doesn't mean they can recover, but this is when you trade or not trade, well, you make the trade you do, but when you draft two running backs and they would be the two highest guys you've acquired at running back in the 6 years you've been there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no question they were expecting them to be the guys. And the lead one is now put himself in serious doubt to being able to be there when the opening bell sounds. I think it's a major question. The problem is I don't know if there's anybody out there available. You got Deontay Foreman. Does that excite anybody? John Kelly, former Browns. You're not, Gus Edwards, you're really just picking up kind of a retread guy. And, that's again why I think it's so unfortunate you didn't bring Nick Chubb back. I know he had a say in this, but surely he wouldn't have been involved in anything like this. And if he would have been anywhere close to what he was before, the injury, you would have a great model for the two guys to learn and then pass the baton. That ship has sailed. And so now Sampson becomes the focal point, but he doesn't seem to be the big power back. He seems to be a great compliment, to what they were going to do with Judkins. But yeah, I think this is a major deal because we've had Jerome Ford here with the Browns. He's been okay, but he hasn't been anything in other words, they had Jerome Ford. They went out and drafted two guys to be ahead of him. So, and now the number one guy, I feel the reason this is so big is because the NFL's going to, unless they find something that hasn't been reported, that he's going to be suspended. Those first 6 games are against 6 of the best teams in the NFL. You wanted to have your running game to help out, to help the defense and so forth. If he's suspended 4, 5, 6 games, we know what it did to Mike Hall. His rookie season, in my opinion, was a waste because by the time he came back after 5, he's playing catch up. He played in 4 games and then he got hurt and then he had the other injury that required surgery. So he's coming into year 2 without much experience. Now Judkins, okay, say he misses 4, 5, 6 games. He's going to be playing catch up to try to get himself acclimated, and hopefully he can by the end of the season, or somewhere in there. It's a completely different position. But I just think those first 5, 6 games is when you need the guy to kind of take the pressure off the defense, take the pressure off the quarterback, whoever it is, and so forth. So, again, whether you call it bad luck or what, I don't know how much research you can do. Everything I saw with him, it seemed like he had a good character issues and so forth. You know what I felt. I favored Travion Henderson. Maybe it's because he was there longer and I saw more of him, but that ship sailed. They acquired Judkins. I thought it was a good move. But now, again, the danger that we always talk about is this time leading up to training camp. It struck a little bit with Shedeur Sanders with the speeding, but this is a major blow, in my opinion, and a black eye to the organization, because when they're trying to move on from Nick Chubb and make Judkins forget him, as I wrote about today or yesterday, all it does is make everybody yearn all the more for Nick Chubb, especially if you see him going off with the Texans. Maybe he won't. The Browns had to have bet that he was done.
Yeah. And I can't imagine a worse possible circumstance for Andrew Berry having made that difficult decision, to move on from Chubb, to have his designated replacement out because he did something, completely wrong. Broken Arrow wants to know, is Judkins even going to show up to camp? I would think he shows, but I don't know.
This is another big question. Okay, what kind of a look at? We know the holdout for the 30 out of 32 teams is for the second rounders is to get that guaranteed money. And the Browns set the precedent there this year by giving Carson Schlesinger a fully guaranteed 4-year contract. He was at 33. 34 was Higgins, and he got it too. Judkins is at 36. They're all waiting for the chain. Well, first of all, I think this would disqualify getting totally guaranteed contract. In other words, I think the Browns would be crazy to give this guy now just because of this. But everybody else is waiting for it. What is the look this week if the Browns say, hey, we just signed Quinshawn to a 4-year, $11 million deal? Pretty bad PR already. And for him to sign, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he isn't there, because I think you can practice, without being under contract, but I'm not sure, if what that is, what kind of, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if he isn't around. He might want to report and they might say, no, go get things taken care of, because
exactly.
And then last year, Mike Hall was able to practice the whole summer, and then he was able to play in the preseason games, but then he couldn't play the first 5 games. So I don't know what the suspension will be. It depends on what their investigation. I'm confused by it. I'm not going to try to play a lawyer or a legal analyst, but I don't understand why it was called a misdemeanor and a little piddly fine of $2,500 or bond or whatever. But then the word comes out from the police report that he had a closed fist punch in the face to the victim. Okay, why is that a misdemeanor then? So I don't understand all that, but that alone makes it a really bad picture in my mind. So, yeah. The NFL, I think first-time offenses for this thing have been close to 6 games. So I think because the girlfriend or whatever with Mike Hall recanted her story last year, it got moved down to 5 games. But there was gun originally involved in it and so forth. So I don't know how this all plays out. But I don't think, even if she recants her story or whatever happens, I still think the NFL has shown that they're pretty serious about these domestic things. And not only these guys, Devin Bush has a hearing for a domestic violence, I believe, Friday this week. And so he might be suspended as well. So it's not a good look all the way around, but I'd be guessing. I would think he'd still get 4 to 6 weeks, as I was just sitting here today based on what I know.
Yeah.
my whole point is that's the critical part of the season. If the Browns are 1-5, I believe the season's over. Just like last year. You can say all you want. Mathematically, you could get back in it, but your season is pretty much over if you get buried before it starts. You have to come out of it at the mid 2-4 or 3-3, and then it lights up a little bit. So I just think they were really relying on that running game, the defense to play well, keep them off the field, shorten the game with the offensive line and the running backs. And that was, I thought, pretty much evident what they wanted to do. You take him out of the equation, I don't know if you can do the same things.
Right. Well, this is really a gut punch, before the season even begins. If they do come out of this 1-5, right, or God forbid 0-6, at that point, don't you entirely, as Kelly Black sort of infers here, don't you sort of start focusing on just finding that franchise quarterback if you're in that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of what I'm saying. I feel like if you're going for it, you give it your best shot with Joe Flacco to start the season. Again, if Kenny Pickett really outplays him, then go with him. Mm-hmm. But say you get to those 6 games and you're at 1-5, there's the rest of the season to even play Pickett, Gabriel, Sanders. You're going to see the 2 rookies every day in practice. You can put them on the practice squad or the scout team and have them face your first team defense and you get a good read on them. Obviously, it's not a real game, but I think they'll have a pretty good idea of what they have. But they definitely have to get a feel and know where they're at, especially if they start at 1-5. You're playing the rest of the season. You might be having a top 5 pick again with 2 first-round picks. Mm-hmm. You definitely have to know if you're going to draft another quarterback or if you feel good enough about one or the other that you have that you can use it on 2 other need positions. But that's kind of where I'm at with Kenny Pickett. If you play him and he had a great season, what are you going to do? Are you going to sign him to the long-term contract and he's your franchise quarterback, or do what the Vikings chose to do and let Sam Darnold walk, and he got the big contract with Seattle, totally relying on the first-round pick they had from last year, J.J. McCarthy, who didn't even play. The Browns don't have a guy like that. So if you played Pickett all year and Gabriel, and he did well, and Gabriel or Sanders never got on the field, you're going to be in the same situation, except you don't have a guy that you drafted at the top feeling like he's the starter.
Right. All right. Well, that's the running back situation. Would just love to see Dylan Sampson emerge, and blow people away. I know he's overlooked a little bit because he was the 5th round pick, not the 2nd round pick, but hopefully he can emerge and surprise a little bit. So let's go on to question number 3 that I wanted to talk about, and that is who emerges at wide receiver behind Jerry Jeudy. You've got Cedric Tillman, Deontay Johnson, Jamari Thrash, and a host of others who are sort of competing for that. I would think that Tillman would be the leader in the clubhouse, maybe Johnson. Do you have a guess at who's going to emerge from that group, Fred?
Well, as I've talked about all offseason, I think Cedric Tillman is the guy they want. I think that by all indications, he is the guy they drafted here. They're really high on. I think Deontay Johnson, they're hoping, they're not going to say it, but they're hoping that he emerges and is in the top 3, because you moved on from Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore, who were 2 of your top 3 at this time last year. Mm-hmm. Jerry Jeudy emerged, but behind him, there's very little proven players, NFL level players. Tillman had a great 3-game stretch, and everybody thought, whoa. I mean, when Winston came in after, well, actually, it was DTR came in after Watson got hurt. 3 of them receivers in that game. All of a sudden, I'm saying maybe there is something at these receivers. They didn't show anything, including Judy, until Watson went down, and then they're throwing the ball over the field, and Judy, Moore, Tillman were all making plays all over the place. And Tillman really was probably the best looking. He had 3 games in a row. I think he had 22 catches, over 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. Really looked good. And then he got the concussion against the Steelers, did not play the final 6 games. That's a concern, you know. Even like the depth, Jerry Jeudy, okay, he's emerged, 90 catches, looked great. But if he were to get hurt, that's a scary looking, and I don't mean good, I mean a bad, scary looking receiver room. And so there's not much depth there. So right now I'd say, yeah, Tillman would be the favorite to be the starter. He's got the size, the range, opposite the speed of Judy. I think they're hoping Deontay Johnson can be that slot guy or regain, you know, you just don't know if you're going to get the, you know, the Deontay Johnson of the Steeler years when he's a Pro Bowler, or you're going to get the guy from last year who I don't know what went wrong. He got bounced all over. Nobody wanted him. He couldn't get along or last with anybody. And so hopefully he sees this as last chance, even if he's playing for a contract with another team, that he goes all in this year and has a great year, because, you know, nobody gave him an option. And there was some pretty good talent there. And it's surprising that nobody other than the Browns even offered him a tryout or a chance to be on the roster for training camp. So it's kind of a scary thing. They're rolling the dice, you know, there.
They really are. They're throwing a dart at the dartboard, whatever metaphor you want to use. But with Deontay Johnson, how often do we see these sort of resuscitation projects actually work out? It seems to be pretty rare, you know, once you struggle in the NFL, to see somebody get back on track, back to where they were, you know, 4 years ago when he was with the Steelers. I'd say the odds are against it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, you've seen it in some quarterbacks, maybe because it's higher profile, the Sam Darnolds of last year, the Geno Smiths, different things like that, even Baker Mayfield. But, you know, it is. And it's not like they really invested much. They gave him a minimum veteran contract, not guaranteed. So they can walk away at any time and not owe him really any money. So that tells me they're not that committed to him. And so that's where I just feel he's got to show up quickly, you know, and show what he can do in training camp. I just think that, you know, again, it's how they approach the season. If you feel like this is just kind of we're saying we're trying to win, but you really aren't. I don't know if you make a go for it move like a Terry McLaurin, you know, or, you know, somebody that wants a new contract that the other team necessarily doesn't want to pay. And that's where Andrew Berry's been pretty good. You know, he got Amari Cooper and he got Jerry Jeudy and, you know, to some extent Elijah Moore. But, you know, there's guys out there not as high profile as McLaurin that are under contract or want a new contract or a team that has many. That could be something you visit during training camp when you say, oh, clearly we can't count on Deontay Johnson. I thought they needed a veteran. I said it was wide receiver was my third biggest offseason need. They didn't draft a wide receiver. They didn't sign any wide receivers other than DeAndre Carter, who's a returner, and then Deontay Johnson after the draft. So that's telling you, yeah, we'll take a guy like that. So I don't know, you know, the way they're approaching it. Clearly, Andrew Berry's hoping one of his draft picks, whether it be Cedric Tillman, Jamari Thrash, David Bell, Michael Woods, one or two of those guys, you know, step up and become guys that he really liked when he drafted.
Fred, would you be interested in I think he's 30 now, Terry McLaurin? He looks like he might be available.
Well, that's what I said, as far as do you feel like, are you in a position to go for it? I would think that would be, you know, the type of move that Andrew Berry has made the last few years when he thought the Browns' window to win was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just feeling by the offseason moves that they might be saying one thing, but they haven't really made moves that tell me that they're going for it, that they feel like they are one player away of the playoffs, And all you have to do is look at quarterback, how they didn't really settle. They got a whole platoon of them, and they're hoping somebody emerges.
Right. And Jeffrey follows up with the question about whether we have cap space for him. I don't know if you're a VIP subscriber, Jeffrey. That would be a perfect question for Jack Duffin, who's the cap master. Let's talk a little bit about what funds this program and all the programming on the OBR streaming network, and that is VIP subscriptions. We have a VIP subscription service. It gives you exclusive access to our VIP premium forums, including Insider Central for scoops. Ask the insiders to ask our guys any question that you feel like asking. You also get all the OBR VIP stories, all the exclusive recruiting and transfer portal scoop from all the college sites on the 24/7 Sports Network. And as soon as you're done with your first month or year and are renewing, you get Paramount Plus for Showtime thrown in for free, which sort of pays for the subscription just by itself. Man, it's a good deal. Hit up the OBR. Please consider it if you enjoy this programming, as it really funds everything that we do. So let's get back to the questions, Fred. Let's move on to question number 4. And the fourth question is whether or not this offensive line can make a comeback in 2025. We've got the band back together. We've got Bitonio. Jack Conklin looks like he's going to play. Wyatt Teller is there. We got all the old guys, but Gio Pete, keeping the offensive line healthy has been next to impossible for this team this last couple of years. Bitonio, Conklin, and Teller, they're all very experienced guys, right? Do you put these guys in bubble wrap, during the preseason and keep them off the field, or what do you do? How much do you think that they're going to need to play in these exhibition games, Fred?
Yeah, I don't think, that. Yeah, that's always the question. You throw out quarterbacks you're looking at like Kenny Pickett or the rookies with backup third stringers. You really, if they have no time, how are you going to evaluate if they're any good? But you don't want to lose. You don't need to see anything from the 4 guys you mentioned. I mean, in August, Posick will be 30. All four of those 5 will be 30 and up. And so this is what they were trained in, this wide zone blocking offense. And that goes back to the Judkins thing, why I think it's such a big deal, because that's what they wanted to do, was the power running game. And how much, when the Browns were a top 5 rushing, was it because of those linemen that we're talking about, or because of Nick Chubb? I think it's a little bit of both. But that's why a top end back can make such a difference, because you just give them a little crease and they're gone. And so that's what we don't know. But I do think that I know that Conklin and Bitonio, and I talked to them at the end after the last game, and they were talking, Bitonio was even talking about retirement, but the sense from Conklin especially was they're very excited to go back to the wide zone, because Stefanski had talked to them about it, and they all seem to have a renewed excitement about it. And I think that's one of the reasons Bitonio came back. I think if they can be successful, it will help the running game. It'll help the team overall, and as they're trying to find their way with the quarterback. And it could even allow them to bring, maybe one or two of those guys back and not have to get 4 new offensive linemen. Because,
Right.
If the team goes 3-14 again, you'll probably move on from most of the offensive line other than DeJuan Jones. And you'll be playing those young guys at the end of the season to see if Zach Zinn or Luke Whippler or Tevin Jenkins, or if they're the answer for 2026 or not. So there's a lot on the line, even for those guys, I think. But I'm optimistic they're going to play well. And so I think they probably would be, with their age and what the mileage they have on them, I don't think they'll play them a lot in preseason. That's where you look at the young guys and see what your depth looks like.
Right. It'll be interesting to see what they do with the offensive line, how they handle it. Obviously, they've added a little bit of new talent there that they're going to want to look at, in addition to the veterans. And hopefully we can just keep them all healthy through the preseason. So the fifth question I have is with regard to defensive end, and not the defensive end position occupied by Myles Garrett, because we know he's going to play that. But on the other side of the line, we've got Isaiah McGuire, we've got Alex Wright, Julian Okwara, Joe Tryon Shoyinka. We've got a bunch of names there. McGuire seems to be sort of a leader in the clubhouse, but how do you think that's going to play out, Fred?
Well, I think by virtue of last year, Alex Wright was trending that way, and then he got hurt, missed the season, torn tricep. McGuire stepped up, particularly in the second half of the season. They made way for him by trading Zadarius Smith. And, I know that McGuire didn't have a lot of sacks, but he graded out well against the run, and he had pressure. And so I really think that they're hoping as he enters his third year, he could really be a breakout player for him. That would go a long way. I think Wright's in the last year of his rookie contract. And so one of those two guys they're hoping takes the job. I think the free agent, Joe Tryon Shoyinka, was the top free agent they targeted to be an edge rusher. They feel he was misused in the 3-4 defense in Tampa Bay. He was a first-round pick. These are the type of guys Andrew Berry likes. Obviously, back when he was coming out, Andrew Berry liked him in the draft, so they target him. He only has 15 sacks in his first 4 years, but they think he can be a situational pass rusher. I think he's the reason they moved Obo Okoronkwo and let him go, because they felt he could take his place at even less money. So I think McGuire would be my favorite to be the starter. They all play in a rotation, but I think it would be McGuire and Wright. And then you have Tryon Shoyinka would be kind of the wild card, mixing things up, and giving Myles Garrett, a break, at that edge. So I think that all the way around, they're counting on one of those two, but I would say right now McGuire would be the guy I would think will emerge there.
Interesting thought from Jeffrey here about moving Mike Hall out to defensive end and letting him rush the passer, which is what he does. You have any interest in that, or you want to keep Hall inside?
Well, Jim Schwartz moves him around, and they talked about doing that last year, but like I said, his season kind of got derailed. When you miss the first 5 games, it's hard, to get the rotation, or even with the player, not practicing and so forth. So, yeah, I think that's an option. I think by getting Malik Collins, who's an inside pass rusher, and drafting Mason Graham, who's an inside pass rusher, Mike Hall's never been known to be a run stopper. So that would be another guy that you could put and move him out there. I don't think they would make him a full-time edge rusher, but they like matchups. And if Graham's taking two guys, and that would free Hall up to go one-on-one with a guard in his first move, or a center to get to the quarterback. It's closer to the quarterback from defensive tackle than it is from outside. But I do think that they might. Jim Schwartz pretty creative, and he plays a lot of guys up there. And if Hall is ready to go, early in training camp, and he can show that he's healthy, I think that they would be open to. They want to get to the quarterback any way they can, and they want to put the best matchups out there. And if Hall emerges one of the best 2 or 3 or 4 pass rushers, they'll find a way to get him on the field no matter what.
Yep, that they will. All right, so interesting question there in terms of watching what's happening at the defensive end position behind Myles Garrett. Question number 6 for us here is with regard to the attitude at training camp. What is training camp going to be like? This team has gotten a lot of criticism for having, I wouldn't call them soft, but maybe not the most intense training camps as they try to avoid injury. You were at Greenbrier last year, Fred. Was intensity lacking in Greenbrier? Do you think that things will get knocked up a bit, as they practice against Carolina and Philadelphia? Are you expecting more intensity in training camp this year?
Well, first off, you can't knock down the intensity when you're playing another team. I mean, those guys are all competitive, and they've been getting fights with their own teammates, So here you're going against somebody in a different jersey, and you're trying to show how tough you are and good enough to make the team, especially a lot of the younger guys. And so, yeah, I thought in the offseason this spring that the intensity had ramped up. If anything, it was more the tempo, running more to drills and getting more, with intentionality on what they're trying to accomplish. I think last year it was a mistake, but I think with Deshaun Watson and all, they felt like if they could just get to the regular season injury-free, everything will fall into place. Well, they had more injuries than about any other team. I don't know what they found in their evaluation, but they fired almost their entire training staff because of that. I don't know how to explain things like you look most of the guys, we look at the injury report like week 18, Browns would have 12 guys on the list, and the teams like the Steelers would have 1 guy, or, how can they be so healthy?
Right.
I don't know. Maybe you could just say it's luck, but no, I expect it. My biggest criticism, and I don't know how you go about doing it, is they don't really practice tackling. I don't know if other teams do or don't. At least tackling to the ground. They might, run up and make an initial pop, but then they kind of back off. And I think you practice that way, you get in the games, and that happens. So the Browns, I think, ranked last in tackling, yards after contact. And I think that kind of goes right back to maybe how you practice. You don't want to get anybody hurt, but you don't practice tackling. How do you know how to tackle when you get in the game?
Right.
So I don't know how they address that unless you do it with a dummy and you just really, take out your frustration and tackle the dummy all the way to the ground. But that's a different, that's a completely different situation because it's not
sure it is. And Jim Schwartz doesn't seem like a guy who would take it easy during training camp to me. Is he pretty intense? They may not be tackling to the ground, but he seems like a guy who would really, keep the adrenaline flowing.
Yeah, I mean, he is. And in all things being equal, if I was running it, I don't want these guys to get hurt either. Do you want, some eager beaver rookie defensive end or whatever hitting Myles Garrett in the back of the leg and he tears his ACL and he's out for the season, because you're, or whatever. Those things happen anyway. But I don't know how you get yourself prepared. it's a fine line, the money they have invested in these guys. But I haven't been to a lot of other training camps, but I hear the Steelers tackle all the way to the ground and hit and are physical. They don't seem to be any worse for wear, when they get to the season. So I don't know if there's a thing of toughen you up that you don't get injured. I don't think that's true. So we'll see, the intensity, but I do expect, because I think Kevin Stefanski, he's a pretty smart guy. I think he's got the vibe around the league is that they've been soft, in practices on the guys and maybe need to pick it up, especially like I just laid out last year. It just seemed like that hurt them.
Yeah. And let's go to the last question, and then we'll deal with questions from the audience. Will the Browns, we went through the depth chart the last couple of weeks, and there are a couple of positions, let's admit that maybe the defensive backfield is one of them, where this team has some depth questions, in case if there's an injury or something along those lines. Do you look at this team as being likely, Fred, to make trades or, significant trades, not picking somebody up at spot 95 on the roster, but really getting somebody who would be first or second on the depth chart over these next couple of weeks?
No.
Absolutely
I think
not.
their offseason moves told us that they didn't really feel like they were going for it this year. Like we were one player away or and I don't expect them to say, yeah, we're rebuilding. We're hoping to get the first pick in the draft or something like that.
Right.
But like I said, there's a lot of good veteran players in their prime on this roster, but anything can happen. But I think they're going to go to camp with what they have. They could make moves. Like I said, I pointed this out several times. Shelby Harris was acquired after Greenbrier, after 2 weeks of training camp. Jim Schwartz probably went to Barry or said, okay, go to your veteran list. Go get me this guy, or we need help here. That could be what they do. They have a list of, I wouldn't say they have to be 30, but that's what I'm talking about. Those 30-year-old plus guys that are sitting at home that are still good.
Yep.
But are waiting for the right opportunity. And the Browns have a list of every position of those guys. Malcolm Smith was a linebacker they brought in midway through training camp, and he turned out to be like the second leading tackler. But these aren't household names. These are just fill in the gap. I just don't think they're going to go out and give up assets, especially draft picks, in trade for a draft that they very well could need all their assets to do what they want to do next year. I'm not saying they're playing for that next year's draft.
Right.
Even if they find their quarterback this year, they still have significant needs. And with 2 first-round picks, you could solve 2 problems potentially, whether it be a tackle, a wide receiver, a cornerback, if you didn't have to get a quarterback. So
exactly.
I don't see them trading, their 4th, 5th, 6th, or whatever to get a top-end, player, unless they really say, we think we're right there. This is too tough of a division. And so much uncertainty at quarterback. I mean, if Deshaun Watson, if and but, if he was playing like a Pro Bowl player like everybody thought, absolutely. But that's not where they're at. By the moves they made this offseason, I already addressed wide receiver. They didn't really address wide receiver. And I thought that doesn't mean just because I thought it was like the 3rd biggest need that that they didn't do it because they didn't think it was important, but their action showed it wasn't that high a priority to them.
Right. And you would think if you're trying to evaluate quarterbacks, you'd really want some good wide receivers out there, but that's just me. So those are the 7 questions I had heading into training camp. Thank you, Fred, for illuminating us on what the possible answers are. Let's go to some questions from the group here in the last couple of minutes of the program. Kelly Black asks, there's an open roster spot with Ellerson Smith retiring. What position would you seek out, Fred, if you were GM of the team at wide receiver, running back, linebacker, safety? Any of those, really strike you as an area where we need to add resources?
At this point, I think you have, okay, if it's 90 man, maybe they have 89. I haven't added them up. If Smith's gone, I mean, maybe a running back because of the Judkins thing, but I don't think it's a pressing issue right now. I mean, the last I looked, they had a boatload of defensive ends. They had a boatload of wide receivers because, especially with the 4 quarterbacks in the mini camp, they signed several tryout guys. The one guy from Menor, they got chances because of that. So I don't expect a significant move. If I was to guess, it would be somebody that was already been around this offseason. There's always roster transactions. They signed a guy, they released a guy, somebody they released, in recent weeks. Like there was one, they brought back the kicker and they released a player. They could bring back that player. I don't even remember his name. So, no disrespect to him, but that's what happens at this time of the season. I don't think Smith was a legitimate, candidate to start or be on the team even.
Next question from Ty Sox. He wants to know, are we sleeping on Jerome Ford? I know we're all down in the dumps because of the Judkins situation, hoping that Sampson comes, roaring out when he plays. But is Jerome Ford somebody we might be overlooking?
Well, I think he's got to be extremely motivated. He had a $3.5 or $3.6 million, contract, and it wasn't guaranteed. And they said, basically, we're going to cut you unless you take a pay cut, and he took $1.75 million guaranteed. That cemented the move with Chubb, at least I think from their thinking. He's in the last year of his contract, so if he's not playing for a future with the Browns, he's playing with it with another team. So I would think he'd be extremely motivated. I don't know if it's so much sleeping on him. We've watched him be the lead back the last 2 years. You would have games or plays where it just looked great. He'd break and he'd be gone. But then there were so many where he was stopped for no gain, and plays that we'd see Chubb get stopped at the line but still get 3 or 4 yards. Seemed like Ford would go right down and, no gain or lose a yard or 2. So I think he's extremely motivated. He's got speed. He's got the quickness. Anything can happen. Maybe he can make everybody forget about Judkins and Chubb. But I think it's the 2 years, the last 2 years of being the feature back. He had 800 yards and he played basically all, Chubb was hurt in the second game, like the second quarter of the second game. And he still only had 800 yards that year. Last year he had 500 yards. So it's a big year for him. So hopefully he's ready to go and takes advantage of this opportunity, because I think he's going to be, I think he would be the lead back, even with Sampson there. They like Sampson, but they didn't like him well enough to draft him ahead of Judkins. So,
right.
That's the way I see it. I even thought Ford would enter camp maybe as the first team running back over Judkins, just in deference, because that's the position he'd been playing. And then there'd be a transformation at some point by the start of the season. But I think it's his job to lose right now.
I sort of think the answer to this question from Sancho is kind of a slam dunk, but I'll ask you your opinion about which position group the Browns are best at, overall team, offense, defense combined. Which position group would you point out and say that's a solid group of players?
A lot of people disagree by the questions I get, but I think offensive line, on offense is the strength. I mean, Jack Conklin was a all-pro player. Joe Bitonio's going to the Hall of Fame likely. Wyatt Teller's a 2 or 3-time Pro Bowler. Easton Posick has played maybe not Pro Bowl level, but right there. They played in this system. I think that those guys, if they stay healthy, I think they can be the strength of the offense. Defense, I think it's the defensive line. I mean, with Myles Garrett, you get anything from Mason Graham and Malik Collins and Alex Wright McGuire, Michael Hall. I think you can, again, be the strength of that side.
All right. My immediate thought was defensive line, because we got the best player, at his position in Myles Garrett, Mason Graham, Mike Hall, a lot of potential on the other side of that defensive line. So that's what I was thinking. If anyone cares, no one does. I tell you what, here's an interesting question from Sancho as well. He's asking, do you prefer doing radio content, video, or writing? And I figure it's got to be video because you get to hang out with me, but you may see things a little bit differently, Fred.
Yeah, sure. I like doing the shows. Did a national show today, and I like doing those type things. Probably radio's a little less being cognizant of my appearance, not as young as I used to be when I used to have full head of hair and I was dashing, but don't maybe have the best radio voice either. So no, I like video. At this stage in my career, I kind of like doing those things a little bit more. Writing is a grind, I like, the idea of opinions and columns and analyzing things like that. The day-to-day writing, I've done for a long time, so I'm used to that. But
right.
Thanks for asking. I take what I can get. I'm glad that Barry still likes having me.
Yeah, we very much like having you on the team, Fred. Here's a question from Broken Arrow. Who gets a contract, Newsome or Emerson?
I would say at this point right now it'd be Emerson.
Mm-hmm.
He's on his rookie contract. I think it's the 4th year or last year of his contract. And I don't think he would demand as big a contract as Newsome seems to. He's been worried about getting paid like Denzel Ward. And that's one of the things he kept arguing about, being an outside corner as opposed to an inside corner.
Mm-hmm.
They need one of those guys to step up and come through, and preferably both of them, because you don't really know what you have behind them. I don't know if Mitchell or Harden are the answer. And if what I alluded to earlier is that if neither of these guys come back next year, or even one of them doesn't come back next year, you're going to probably have to draft a cornerback, maybe even in the first round, to replace them. So I think it's a big year for both of them. I wrote about that in the last couple of days.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. One more question. I got to admit that I don't know much about this player because I've got total blinders on when it comes to the Browns. I've tracked the Browns and the AFC North teams, and beyond that, I'm sort of out of it. But Jeffrey wants to know about Dameon Pierce. Do you know anything about Dameon Pierce? He was average.
Yeah, Barry. He's the guy who returned that kick for the Texans that Dustin Hopkins pulled a hamstring.
Oh, okay.
And he's a big back, almost like a fullback, and he's pretty impressive, as far as short yardage and so forth. So, yeah, I mean, if he was available, that to me, would be, I'd be interested in that.
All right. One last comment. Fumble 13 wants to point out that bald is beautiful. We should embrace it. I'm going with the comb over. Man, I'm going to string that comb over out till it screams. But
that's why I usually wear a hat. But
yeah,
I'm figuring I might do some TV this year, and so I need to kind of get used to. I don't see too many guys with hats on when they're on TV, unless it's the president or something.
Yeah. Well, they're too smart to put me on TV, so I rock the hat as much as I can. At any rate, thank you very much out there for your questions and comments throughout the show. They make the show what it is. And Fred, thank you as always for hanging out with me and answering my stupid questions. Thanks to everybody who watched the program. Loved having you live. We've got a nice audience here. And we will be back again next week after the first day. Training camp is open to the media. Fred is going to leave that green field in Berea, and he's going to come here to OBR Weekly. So you want to stay tuned for that. So thanks, Fred. We'll see you all next week.
Thank you, everybody.